evening. This is an informal meeting of the Gardner City Council on Monday, October 16th, 2023. I'd like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilor Boone. Councilor Craig Cormier.
Present.
Councilor Rhonda Cormier. Councilor Darrell Howard.
Present.
Councilor Hardern.
Present.
Councilor Heath.
Present.
Councilor Math.
Present.
Councilor Sisson.
Present.
Councilor Tyros.
Present.
Councilor Walsh.
Present.
And President Kaczynski.
Present. Thank you. For the public watching this evening, we are meeting informally tonight on an item, a communication from Councilor George Tyros regarding review of the city's disaster response plans. We have Mayor Nicholson here, Chief McAveen from the Gardner Police Department, and our Director of Emergency Management, Paul Topolsky, to give a presentation to the council on this matter. We're going to begin with Mayor Nicholson.
Thank you very much, Madam President and councilors. This is something that the day after Leominster had those torrential rain pours that caused several infrastructure issues out in Leominster, Councilor Tyros reached out to my office and said, you know, what would happen if this happened in Gardner? Is this something that, you know, we could do a presentation before the city council for? That way we'd know if this were to happen in Gardner, what would our response been, how prepared would we have been, and things of that nature. The city does have certain plans in place in terms of when we provide shelters for members of the public, not just for weather in terms of rain, but also for cold. Normally, if we're out of power for more than 48 hours in a period, that's when we start to look for those warming centers and things of that nature. So it's not just rain that we plan for. I will say that Director Topolsky, who will be up here in just a little bit, is our city's guru, for lack of a better term, on all things related to that, between working for the city through the ice storm in 2008 to COVID, when we were dealing with FEMA and MEMA and all of those matters, to when we had an extended period of a power outage last year when it was 4 or 5 days without power in certain areas of the city. He was our phone call, and it was really the person who's in charge of all of those roles. He's been in this position since 1996, 2 years after I was born. So he understands how these roll quite integrally, to the point where even having a radio command center for the city's parade in case anything happened and to make sure things were clear in that type of planning. That was all his brainchild on that one and part of his roles. But it's hard to predict what exactly is going to fall out of the sky and what Mother Nature will come next. So we try to plan for the most, you know, general instances we can. If a shelter is needed, this is where our primary shelter is. This is where, if we have National Guardsmen come in, this is where they get stationed. This is command headquarters, and so on from there. And before I say anything incorrectly, Director Topolsky can certainly come up and share any of those. This is probably something that I anticipate to be more question and answer based. Because again, it's not a one size fits all or even a one plan fits everything, every scenario type of situation. But we do the best that we can, which there. And with that, if there's any questions for myself, Chief McAveen, or Director Topolsky, we'll be happy to answer those. Paul, I don't know if you want to come up and say a couple of them.
Good evening, Madam President, honorable councilors. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. Where would you like me to begin?
Whatever works for you.
Okay. As the mayor mentioned, specific disaster plans, step 1, step 2, step 3 type of planning, as General Eisenhower put it, plans are useless, but planning is everything. So the all hazards format that we look at now in emergency management is simply managing and creating resources and then allocating those resources, such as like you would use tools out of a toolbox. So depending on the disaster, it's all about how we allocate resources, whether they be human resources, physical resources within the city, and outside resources, and our emergency management partners at MEMA and ultimately FEMA. To give you an example, Mayor mentioned the parade. We knew that there was going to be a communications issue between the parade coordinators and parade marshals and also with public safety. So I reach into the toolbox. I partner up with the local ham radio club for personnel. They're very qualified communicators. They have radio equipment that they can assist us. Our local radio club has resources which were invaluable. All right, so those are some of the tools. Then, of course, the equipment that we acquired through many, many grants over the years, such as our communications trailer and radio communications, gave me the ability to not only help the parade people out, but also keep our public safety people in touch. We have dedicated radio systems to the police department. Our radio equipment in our trailer has police, fire, EMS, as well as many, many, many of the surrounding communities for mutual aid. So those are just a couple of the tools that we can pull out of a toolbox to help us respond and recover from any disasters or emergencies, or in that particular case, a public event. As far as sheltering is concerned, on the 11th, we met with Red Cross to recertify our primary shelter at the middle school, and our first survey to certify the new elementary school as our secondary shelter. One of the issues with sheltering is that if you ask the Red Cross, they respond to about 50,000 disasters a year. For them, a disaster is everything from the major hurricane to a house fire. If we have a situation here in town where we have a house fire in an apartment or two, then our fire department contacts the Red Cross. They come out and provide assistance. If we have something larger, let's, for example, say the Elm Street Gardens on House Street. We get a fire in one of those units, that's going to shut the whole building down. 30 apartments, 2 people per apartment. What am I going to do? I have the senior center, which we can use to temporarily house those folks up to 24 hours. The equipment to do it, and kitchen and food, and the place where Red Cross can come in and provide those longer term services for those folks. So again, each one of those is a tool in the toolbox that we can reach into depending on what the nature of the disaster or emergency is.
The President mentioned the ice storm. That was an example of an emergency that was localized to this immediate region. Could you describe, if you recall, I know it's a few years back, what the response was at that time and how things were managed?
Oh, that's our high water mark, so I have that always at the front of my mind. The first thing that happened was that, of course, we had some advance notice of the ice storm, and then it intensified very rapidly. And now we're getting portions of the city being shut down, branches coming down. And I received from, as a matter of fact, at the time, Sergeant McAveen, and said, we need some help with some people to man a cruiser at Crash Corner and 101 and 140. And I says, okay. So I got on the phone and started my telephone tree with our community emergency response team. And I had to go and pick up several people. And by the time I got to the police station, one of the CERT members that lives right on Pleasant Street was hot on the heels of, at that time, Sergeant McAveen, and getting into the cruiser and learning how to work the equipment in there so we could go monitor a intersection. From there, myself at the time being a 911 certified dispatcher, went in and assisted with dispatch and answering phones in the police station. It became very evident quickly that this isn't going to be a 12-hour, 24-hour situation, and we knew it was going to go into days. So the next day we met in the mayor's office with Mayor Hawk and started citywide planning on what was going to happen. One thing about emergency management versus the other city services, first off, we're not first responders like a police officer or a firefighter. Emergency management does not self-deploy. I'm the only one that would ever initially go out on anything if it became, from what I view as bad enough, and I coordinate and see if our services are needed, and if not, I'm good. If we are, at that point, I can start to expand my response, and of course, I would operate under the authority of the mayor, who have to declare an emergency in the city. Little sidebar, a declaration of emergency does not mean everyone should get from the street. It does not mean people can't go to work. It does not mean the businesses must be shut down. The first purpose of a declaration of emergency is to allow the city to legally spend beyond their budget for mitigating a disaster. All right. Conditions can be attached if needed, but the declaration simply gives us the legal authority to spend as needed to respond to that disaster. So once we got the storm, or once the storm got started, the next morning we met in the mayor's office, and I pretty much knew we were going to have to do some sheltering. At that time, the only viable shelter in the city was the middle school as our primary, and then we got permission from the state to also use the armory. And that's where we started to see some issues. For example, the armory did not have power, does not have a backup generator. So, call our partners at Mass Emergency Management. I've got a shelter, I got a place to put people, I need cots, I need blankets, and I need power at my armory, and I also need assistance from National Guard folks to help us at the armory, and I knew they were going to be needed for the highway department as well. So, where police, fire, EMS, highway department, public health, they have their responsibilities, and they're simply going to increase their response in those areas. But there are areas that those departments aren't set up to do, aren't chartered to do. Sheltering is one of them, and emergency management can handle that. Also, bringing in the resources from outside the area through Mass Emergency Management falls within the emergency management program as well. Did I answer your question, Counselor?
It does, thank you.
How many do you have on your emergency response team, and how are they trained?
Okay. Per Presidential Directive 5 and 7 after 9/11, the West Coast program for community emergency response team was adopted nationwide. And with that came training and standards for people to be trained to assist in their communities. The premise is learn how to protect yourself and your family, learn how to help your neighbors, your immediate neighbors, and then learn how to help the community at large. And one of the big issues at the time, particularly here in Massachusetts, was liability. Everybody had liability on the brain. No, we don't want anything else. We got to have qualified people with liability. Once the program got going, and under Mayor St. Hilaire, we decided to start a program here. So our first community emergency response team folks were, I needed people that I could trust, so I turned to the ham radio community, and we created what they call the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, and started that and trained those folks in the CERT program. In the CERT program, you learn everything from basic first aid to how to safely get people out from underneath the collapsed buildings, how to approach a building, how to approach people, how to survey. For example, you have a business that's been severely affected by, say, an earthquake. You want to go down, you have to assess what is in that building and report that. So if someone is injured, you take care of immediate breathing and bleeding and move on, and then go through the building, come out, report, and then come back in and finish the treatment. So many concepts. It was about an 8-week course that people spent 3 hours on a Saturday doing. And we really had a hard time getting a crew together when we started that team. The hams were great because they're already predisposed to public service. But the rest of the community, it was very hard and slow. After the ice storm, we didn't have trouble getting anybody when we held a lot of classes. At the peak, I think we had about 40 people trained and certified. However, due to two factors, number one, attrition, people moving out, people deciding that that's not for them anymore, and of course COVID, where we couldn't continue the programs, we couldn't get together. Our team right now is down to about 6. One of the things that turns people off about the program is that extended training. Our partners over in Templeton, at the Templeton Emergency Management, they've taken a different track on CERT, and they're going to train the people for what emergency management needs are. And it makes much shorter training period and more concentrated in those particular areas. So that's the model that we're looking at to bring our program back in. And with that, one of the communities that we want to tap into is the senior community, because the senior community not really able in most cases to go through the full program, using cribbing to lift up walls and other physically demanding stuff. But our senior community can certainly register people at shelters and learn how to help shelter people out, learning CPR and first aid and so forth. So that's going to be our next foray to get our team built up. If we had to open a shelter today, we have our Red Cross partners that can help us at that shelter. The technology that we now have in emergency management through our many grants allows us to do a lot of things by computer, so we would be moving equipment over to the shelter, registering people there, and it's a simple computer input now as opposed to tracking 500 people that we sheltered during the ice storm. So, and that is a lot of sit-down jobs. So we're hoping to tap into the senior community to help us with that.
So you're actively seeking volunteers at this point?
The 6 people that we have now, my deputy directors and others, we are putting a program together as we speak to start start recruiting. We've had some, I've had one presentation over at the senior center on what it's about, and we didn't get any responses at that time, but hopefully as we get the word out, we're going to start to see more people come into the program.
Councilor Towers?
Thank you very much for the presentation thus far. Something that came to my mind, you mentioned first steps in emergency is to take care of yourself and your family. Where would you like any residents that may be watching this video to go to learn more about how they can help protect themselves and their family in emergency?
Best place to go is FEMA.gov. There's lots and lots of information, lots and lots of videos, even some training courses. The new CERT program is going to be based on that website as well. There's lots of certification programs. For example, Incident Command is for lack of a better term, the business plan under which we use in emergency management. Lots and lots of courses there as well. So FEMA.gov.
I'll start, Councilor. Okay. So, Director, you had said, your connection to MEMA and FEMA as well. So when there's a situation where the community needs to be connected to those 2 organizations, you're the main contact there, or you're one of the main people who works with them to get the community connected with them?
That's correct. We do not work directly with FEMA until pretty much after the disaster, right? We may have a FEMA representative, such as we did during the ice storm, that would come out and just check and see how things were going and offer any suggestions. But my primary contact is Mass Emergency Management. All of the funds for the grants, reimbursements, everything is awarded to the state, and then the state passes that money along to us. So when we start seeing our COVID reimbursements coming in, we're going to be getting a check from the state, not directly from FEMA. However, all of the paperwork has to go through FEMA. They have to approve everything. Then that job is going to be duplicated at the state level. And then once the state approves it, then we just start seeing some of our reimbursement funds come in.
Thank you. And we met on a very regular basis during COVID, so I appreciate that. And I think that's a good explanation. I know I wasn't aware of that until that time. And I think it's helpful because, like the disaster that just happened in Leominster, when a state of, I think what's important is when a state of emergency is declared even by the governor, it doesn't automatically mean, or even if your community has a state of emergency, it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be getting funds from FEMA, through MEMA or anything. There's a process that happens there, and they usually send people out to the communities. Is that correct? Like how that process works?
Well, if there's a wide enough disaster, the first thing that has to happen is the governor must declare a state of emergency. We can declare a state of emergency here anytime that we need to, all right? But then the state has to go, or the governor has to go to the president to get a presidential declaration, and then at that point, FEMA funds may be coming available. So there's a definite chain that we have to go through. And, it starts with us. Okay, we're having trouble. We're declaring an emergency. I need resources from MEMA because we've outstripped our local resources, such as they did in Leominster. I mean, there was just so much damage that they had to reach out to the state, and the state had people coming in and represented right in their emergency operations center to be sure that if the city needed anything beyond what they had, that it was happening very rapidly. For COVID, anything that we needed from the state would process through my office for any resources that we could get from them. There's a website that we use. It's called WebEOC, and that allows me to track whatever it is that we need, track what we're doing. For example, at the police and fire department, they have a program called IMC, which does all of their records handling. All right. WebEOC is the emergency management equivalent to that, and that's all done online. And every request that I had to make from MEMA, I simply filled out a form online. Someone reviews it down in Framingham, or more likely in Agawam, where the regional office is, and they'll review that, and if they say, okay, yeah, we have these resources, then I get information that the resources are on the way. So it's a very clear line of communication up and down, and resource requests and fulfillments coming through that same line.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councilor Mack?
Just like fire, please, does the emergency management system offer mutual aid to other cities and towns in the area, such as Leominster?
Yes, we are part of mutual aid. We are now this year a signatory on the Northwest Worcester County Emergency Planning Committee, or Regional Emergency Planning Committee. That's new. That's been in existence for less than a year now, and we're starting up. We've already had one drill. We're looking at some more. So we can immediately in these areas get help and assistance from surrounding communities.
Any further questions, comments from the City Council on the topic of the meeting? Thank you, Chief McAbeen. Thank you, Director Polsky, and thank you, Mayor Nicholson.
Again, thank you for the invitation. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to close out here, because I don't get to say it to him enough, so publicly is probably the best way to do it. Director Topolsky really does put a lot of hours weekly into the city and his work that he's done there. In my previous employment as a town administrator, one of the ways you get certified in that position is you have to take a professional development class in each one of your department heads' areas. And one of the things required is an emergency management tabletop exercise. And I've learned more about this talking to Paul in a half an hour at a time than I did in any of those exercises that I had to take in that job that I had. So he does a lot for the city, and we're really lucky to have him here for what he does. So I just want to say thank you in front of you all for renewing his appointment when I put it up last year, but also for the work that he did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hearing nothing, we will close this part of the meeting, reconvene at 7:30 for our regular meeting. Thank you.